Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar today, Northern Australia Development Program Overview of 3 new grants. I'm Peter Towers, the Managing Director of Towers Business Development Proprietary Limited. We are conducting a live feed on Facebook, and our apologies for the late start of this webinar today. If you have any questions during the webinar, can you please enter them via your computer into chat, and I will attempt to answer the questions later on during the webinar to the best of my ability. You have to appreciate this is legislation that's been developed by the Northern Australia Development Program, and some of it is very new. In fact, it's all very new. What we've got on the screen now is the Northern Australia eligibility map. It's basically defined as the area north of the Tropic of Capricorn in Queensland and Western Australia, and the whole of the Northern Territory. So it's businesses within those boundaries or organisations that we are referring to in this webinar. It includes the various islands that are in those locations, and obviously it's including some major cities and very significant mining and pastoral and fishing areas. So the eligibility of business and organisations for these grants, they're projects located in those Northern Australia areas or projects which significantly benefit Northern Australia. So the program grants that have been announced by the Northern Australia Development Board is the Northern Australia Business Development Grant, the Industry Transformation Grant, and the Business and Community Growth Program, which was announced very recently. The targeted entities from these grants are, for the North Australia Business Development Grant, we have small to medium-sized businesses, basically relating to companies and trusts. And this also includes Indigenous businesses that have been incorporated under the Corporations, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Act. We then have the Northern Australia Industry Transformation Grant, and this is targeted at medium-sized businesses to large businesses for both companies and trusts. And I'll say more about both companies and trusts a little bit later on. And the Northern Australia Business and Community Growth Program is targeted at businesses, sole traders and partnerships, but not a business that's eligible under the Business Development Grant or the Industry Transformation Grant. So it obviously doesn't include companies or trusts that are eligible under those other 2 programs. But it also includes incorporated associations, incorporated not-for-profit organisations, and Indigenous corporations. So it's a very wide field of organisations that can qualify under the Business and Community Growth Program. Now let's look at the grant size and employee numbers, because these apply, grant size applies to each of those 3 grants, and employee numbers apply to 2 of them. Applicants, first of all, are required to match the government contribution. And it's very important that you're aware of that when you're completing an application. And that you also have an appreciation that the Australian government will not make any payments for any expenditure that is undertaken prior to an agreement being signed under these grants. So unfortunately, if you've already undertaken expenditure, you cannot claim it as expenditure under this grant program or these grant programs. So let's look at the grant size and employee numbers. For the business development grant, the grants range from $50,000 to $2 million. So that's meaning that the minimum project is $100,000 and the maximum project that you're going to receive funding for is $4 million. Obviously, you can spend $5 million if you wish, but the maximum grant funding will be $2 million, and your company or your organization has to pay the other $3 million. And you can have up to 199 employees to qualify under this particular grant. For the industry transformation grant, we're looking at a minimum size grant of $3 million, up to $10 million maximum. So obviously the projects are looking at a minimum of $6 million. A maximum for you to get the full grant money will be $20 million, but the same as I just illustrated previously. If the project is to cost $25 million, the organizers, company directors would have to appreciate that $10 million is the maximum that would be forthcoming from this grant, and you would be self-funding the balance of $15 million. And you must have more than 20 employees. There's no upper limit, but you must have more than 20 employees to qualify under the industry transformation grant. If you're interested in the business and community growth program, so you're a sole trader or a partnership, or you're one of those community organizations, the grants range from $50,000 to $2 million. So once again, the project's minimum of $100,000, maximum to receive the full grant funding, $4 million. And there are no employee numbers quoted anywhere that I've been able to find in the guidelines for the business and community growth program. Now, assistance for the Northern Australia Development Program categories can be summarised as follows, and there's a wide range of assistance available. For the development of new infrastructure or significantly growing the value of an existing business and contribute to transformational change in a region. So there's a few points in that, isn't there? Development of new infrastructure, that's brand new. I'm looking at one of those at present for a client, or significantly growing the value of an existing industry. But there's no credit being given in this legislation for what that existing industry might be worth. This is new expenditure that you would be putting on top of that project that the applicant is paying 50% of. And contributing to transformational change in a region. This is a key emphasis in this whole program. The Northern Australia Development Board is looking for transformational change in Northern Australia from these grant funds if they can achieve it. Creation of new activities, plant and equipment for the new project, and office equipment, computers, anything that's needed to go into a building. Obviously, processing equipment being installed into a factory. Establishing of a new industry. This might be completely new. What is going to be looked at? Hydrogen's getting a lot of mention in Northern Australia at present. Townsville's just been named as one of the federal government's preferred hydrogen hubs, and I know Darwin's already named. Gladstone is also in Queensland, but it's just a little bit south of where the Northern Australia boundary is, just south of the city on the outskirts is probably a better way of putting it, the southern outskirts of the city of Rockhampton. Significantly growing the business or organization could be the reason for the funding. Contributing to transformational change, I've already mentioned that. Scaling up the business or organization. So the income in the business that currently might be $3 million, and this expenditure is going to enable the organization company to scale up so its income's about $10 million. Diversifying activities, doing something different. Building economic resilience for your business or organization, very important. It might be replacing imports, or it might be building something that's new completely to Northern Australia. And the relevant training and skills development that's directly related to the project. So if you're doing something new, the team's got to be trained. So the cost of training the team, implementing the systems can be claimed as part of this project, because that's very important. Feasibility studies, business case to bring the project to investment ready if you're going to be looking to raise some capital. Process design and engineering, environmental approval costs, business planning, marketing activities. All of those things have got to be related to the targeted project, not something else. It's what you're wanting to do here. The applicant's contribution towards the costs. Now, the guidelines indicate that you might be getting that funding, the 50% at least, that it's going to cost the applicant from private investment, but it also mentions Australian government grants, state or territory government grants, and local government grants. So you would need to, in the application, enclose full details of grants which have already been approved by those other organisations. How many are going to be able to get those sort of approvals will be very interesting. General eligibility criteria. You need an Australian business number. Companies must be certified by an accountant as being a trading corporation. So they're not shelf companies. They've got to have economic activity. And there's a form that the accountant needs to sign off on. And trustees of trusts can be applicants. That's a corporate trustee of a trust, but they must be certified by an accountant as being a trading trust. So it's the same thing. It's just not a sleeping organization. It's doing something, it's earning money. Now, the general eligibility criteria also, joint applications are acceptable provided someone is the lead organization, because they've got to be the main driver of the project. They've got to look after all of the deliberations with the Northern Australia development program, but they need to be the driver of this, making sure it's going to happen. And if successful in your application, you must agree with a strengthening Northern Australia business facilitator to develop and implement a business roadmap. I've had difficulty tracking down where these business facilitators are located. There's obviously one operation centred on Darwin. So whether that's for the whole of Northern Australia, I haven't been able to determine at this stage, but I'm sure that by the time the first lot of applications are being processed, we'll know where those people are. They will travel to you, so you don't have to worry about going to Darwin if you're based in Rockhampton. That's not an issue, but I don't know much more about it at this stage. I was involved in a program like that some years ago. For 11 years, my company, Towers Business Development, was an appointed consultant to the Oz Industry program, commercialising emerging technology. And I looked after the area that's covered by 2/3 of Northern Australia, anyhow, the central and North Queensland area. Actually, I looked after Gladstone North. Unfortunately, Gladstone's not included in this program. And also the Northern Territory. So I made probably around 80 to 90 trips to the Northern Territory over that 11-year period. So got to know it very well. Application requirements. There needs to be a business case. Now, a business case is very similar to a business plan. So it includes the project plan, the project budget, and the cash flow forecast. The project plan, project budget, and the cash flow forecast, which is going to include a significant amount of money, especially if your application is to claim anywhere near $2 million or anywhere at all in the grant for the industry transformation grant, which would run from $3 million to $10 million in government grant. The government's not going to hand that money over unless they receive a very detailed application. I've already mentioned the accountant certificate relating to compliance with trading corporation and trading trust requirements. The accountants will know what that means. They will obviously, you would go to your own accountant and get that document signed so that can be submitted as part of the application. You also need to submit in the application details of where you're going to get your share of the costs from. They're going to come from your own funds. You're going to need to be able to identify that and show very clearly in the cash flow forecast that you can do without that money, whether it's $50,000 or $2 million or $10 million, doesn't really matter. But the government's team will be making sure that that money can be extracted from the business because it's going to be needed to fund your obligations under this program. It could come from shareholders or members' contributions. So if you're a company, you could be saying you're going to go to your shareholders and have a share issue. I think the program would require a bit more than that, though. They would probably prefer that that's already occurred and the money's in a separate bank account. Or they would want a signed undertaking by the shareholders that they're going to actually contribute that money. And the larger that money gets to, the larger the sum is, the more stringent I think the North Australia Development Program's requirements will be on that. They'll want to make sure that that money is actually going to flow into this activity. Or you could look, if you're a company, at capital raising, utilising crowdsourced funding equity raising, which allows a company with a turnover less than $25 million to be able to raise up to $5 million in a 12-month period from the public. Or Section 708 of the Corporations Act allows a company to raise up to $2 million in 12 months from a maximum of 20 investors. So that's there if you want to do it that way. The organisation, though, if you're looking at this from a potential organisation making an application under the Business and Community Growth Program, you will have to give serious consideration as to where you are going to get your funds from if you haven't currently got them sitting in a bank account waiting for a project like this to be finalised. Because you haven't got the option of going to the public to try to raise capital. If you're going to try to raise it as a bank loan, you can do that, of course, but you will need to submit all the information and the bank approval letter and make sure that there's no significant ways that the bank or other financing organisation can withdraw that offer. So therefore, the application needs to have attached to it the loan application. And if the application is for a trust, as trustee for a trust, the development program requires a copy of the trust deed. So they can make sure that the trust has got the power to do what you're proposing to do. Assessment criteria. There's a fair bit of mention of the assessment criteria, so it's important to understand it. The general criteria is you need to be able to identify in your project plan how your project's going to create new jobs. And new jobs is really lit up in neon signs on this whole grant program. So you're going to do this by scaling up, you're going to do it by diversifying, you're going to do it by building economic resilience for your business and for Northern Australia. You need to identify your capacity to undertake this project. If your business or your organization is currently flat out doing 6 other things all at once, who's going to be the driving force to make this happen? So you've got to look at your capacity. What's the manpower capacity, the financial capacity, the organizational capacity to make all this happen? So you then need to identify the capabilities that you've got. Have you got people who understand what you're trying to do, who can implement it? Have you got people who are going to be able to be the leaders in whatever new business you're creating? So capability is very important. You're going to be able to sell the products you produce. You need to identify the resources that you have that are available for this project. And that could be human resources, marketing people, sales people, social media experts. If you need to significantly expand your promotion through social media. And obviously you need to be identifying how you're going to establish a new industry or significantly grow the value of an existing industry in Northern Australia. And I suspect there's going to be a few people wanting to do this, but you've got to be able to document it as if you would do so in your business plan. And to what extent are you going to diversify your current operations or grow a new business activity? Because there are some risks in all of this. You diversify, yeah, there's some risks. And obviously, if you're going to try to grow your business, there's risk. You're going to be able to sell the new product you produce. What are your competitors going to do? Just for a couple of starters. And this concept of building economic resilience in Northern Australia comes through again. Is your project going to contribute to that? If you're going to create another 50 jobs, so those people are going out into the marketplace with their salary packages to spend, and are you going to help keep the fabric of businesses operating soundly because you've established your business, so other businesses might be going to spin off it? And that happens all the time, doesn't it? Okay, assessment criteria number 1. So this is what you're going to be assessed on. What I've gone through so far was just the preliminaries. The business case must describe the business opportunity. It's got to clearly identify it. And it's got to describe what the regional, and that means Northern Australia, regional economic benefits are. What effects it going to have on supply chains? And that's going to vary for every applicant, of course. So you need to think through supply chains. And what impacts are you going to have on employment growth? That needs to be noted. And what about employment growth outside your business? If you create an extra 100 jobs, was a fair reckoning, we get an economist to do some calculations, there's a flow-on effect because the baker's going to need a few more staff, or one, and the butcher and the cafe and the hotel and so on, because you've put this group of people together. And what are the jobs that you think are going to be created? What are the immediate jobs, but what are the longer term ones? And there's some interesting projects already started in Northern Australia that have got these sorts of implications. There's people seriously looking at a hydrogen industry and development of batteries using new knowledge, new systems. So if they were answering this, they'd have some immediate jobs they're creating, but there's also their vision for a long term, 4, 5, 10 years time. Significant numbers of people working in those industries. What skill levels are going to change because of this project? Are you going to take a group of people at a certain skill level, but then have to train them up so that they have got a whole host of new skills that they develop over the next year or so? And what's the employment sustainability? Is these businesses going to work 12 months of the year and hopefully for many years to come? Or is it a seasonal operation that you're only going to need these people for 7 or 8 months in the year, which does happen in a significant number of industries in Northern Australia? So you're going to be able to describe the broader regional, social, or environmental benefits. And don't forget the environmental benefits. The environment is very important. And it's very important in any sort of government application for grant funding at present. And is the project in a pilot region of growth? Do you know if you're in a pilot region of growth? And we're going to show you that now. The pilot region of growth are described in the grant explanatory material. So it's the region of growth in the Northwest Agricultural Corridor, which is in Western Australia. Starts at Broome, goes to Kununurra, and then goes across to Darwin. Or the Strategic Gas Basin, which is in the Beetaloo Basin to Darwin. Or the Strategic Gas Basin, which is mine and produce to port, which is basically the Mount Isa to Townsville story. So that rail route, highway route, the Flinders Highway, from Mount Isa back into Townsville. Businesses located along that access are part of this pilot regions of growth. And then we have the Strategic Gas Basin, which is agriculture, aquaculture, and manufacturing precinct, which covers these local government areas: Cairns, Yarrabah, just south of Cairns, Cairns to Gladstone, Cassowary Coast, Innisfail, Tully area, Hinchinbrook, Palm Island, Townsville, the Burdekin of Eyre and Home Hill, Clare and Garoo. How's the grant going to impact your project in terms of the scale of your operation and your timing and reach? And presumably the answer there is going to be, obviously, if you get grant funds of 50% of the cost of a project, you're going to be able to build it quicker and start bringing the economic benefits of your operation to the fore. And how are you going to measure the success of your project? So that's assessment criteria 1. I hope you've thought about some answers. Criteria 2, and you only go into assessment criteria 2 if you've earned a rating of more than 50% on your answers to criteria 1, according to the guidelines. You need to identify your capacity, capability, and resources to deliver this project, because that was identified in criteria 1. So hopefully you've really answered that. And you should demonstrate by describing what's the track record of your business or your organization in managing similar projects. And what's your access to personnel with relevant skills and experience? If you're going to develop a brand new project, you and your directors or management committee or leadership team understands that, has a passion for it, can drive it. This is very important from a government type organization. And is your project plan commensurate with the size and scope of your project? If you're going to put an application in for a $2 million grant, so that's saying the project's costing $4 million. Your response, I suspect, has got to be more than 2 or 3 pages of material. They are going to be looking for a lot more. They want some substance. So the project plan has got to be commensurate with the size and scope of your project. If your organization's seeking a grant of $50,000 for a $100,000 project, you won't be expected to put in the volume of material that I believe will be required to secure a grant of $2 million. You've got to show how you're going to manage this project. If you thought it through, if you planned it, the scope, governance, what's the daily, weekly, monthly meeting process going to be? Who's in charge? The implementation methodology. So you need a plan so that everything can be marked off as it's achieved, that flows through the time frame. How are you going to mitigate delivery risks? And every project has these. How are you going to plan to make sure you're going to be able to get the material, the services, and whatever into North Queensland? Secure required regulatory or other approvals. If you're building something new, you've got to talk to the local government organisation. You may have to talk to Main Roads or the railway department because you want to cross a railway line, or other government organisations. You'll have to talk to the electricity authorities to make sure you can get electricity, and to the council, whoever's responsible for supply of water in the area you want to undertake your development. So all those activities need to be handled. So the Northern Australia Development Program want to know that you've thought about this, because this is part of your experience in undertaking projects. And what other support or investment will be leveraged to progress your project? Is there some other activities that are conditional in your project proceeding for them to start? This will aid your application if you can summarize those matters. But get some proof, not just newspaper articles. Try and get the organisation to commit. Yes, they're waiting for you to start because they want to buy some products from your new business that you're creating, or whatever. Now, please note, the Commonwealth will not be liable and should not be held, this is straight out of their documents, as being liable for any activities undertaken before the grant agreement is executed. So to give yourself an idea of the timing, the committee that's reviewing applications is going to look at them every 3 months. They've just started on the first group. They closed on the 10th of December. On my reckoning, the next close off will be early March, and then every 3 months. And once you get into the process, it's probably going to take another 3 or 4 months before you get an approval and you get a document. So it's not going to be a fast journey. You're dealing with a government agency who have to undertake appropriate due diligence, and they're handing out a significant amount of taxpayers' money. They've got to make sure. But the key matter I'm trying to highlight to you here is that you're not going to get any reimbursement for expenditure that you've already undertaken. So if you're really relying on this grant being received, make sure you do not undertake any funding, spending of money at this stage, if you think that would be part of the process that you're putting to the Northern Australia Development Program. A significant amount of detail is required to secure a grant. I know that because I've been heavily involved in these types of programs over the years. Towers Business Development has considerable experience and is able for appointment as the consultant to facilitate the preparation of applications for businesses and organisations. And I'm working on 2 of those at present. We've had experiences, which I mentioned earlier, in performing services in a large part of Northern Australia, Central and North Queensland and the Northern Territory. We were the contractor to Oz Industry to perform the COMET, which was Commercialising Emerging Technology program, which we did for 11 years. That program is now called Accelerating Commercialisation. My background is as an accountant. I've been a fellow of the CPAs, fellow of the Institute of Company Directors, a member of the Management Consultants. I've been a Chief Financial Officer and Company Secretary of a listed public company, senior partner of an accounting firm for over 25 years, and an independent consultant operating Towers Business Development for the last 20 years. We've got experience in a wide range of business matters. Business planning, predictive accounting, which is budgets, cash flow forecasts and projected balance sheets, capital raising for SMEs, utilising crowdsourced funding, equity raising, early stage innovation company, or Section 708 of the Corporations Act. We can offer virtual Chief Financial Officer services and company secretary services. So if you need to know more, please send me an email, peter@towersbusiness.com.au, or telephone me on 1800-232-088, or go to our website, please, www.towersbusiness.com.au, and that will give you an overview of a lot of the services that we provide for businesses all over Australia, but with a particular emphasis on Northern Australia. So that's the overview of this grant. If you have any questions, can you please send me through an email? And I hope that you're able to undertake these activities. This recording is going to a whole range of people who indicated that they were unable to attend this live presentation, but they're going to listen to it over the next few days. If you have any questions, please contact me, and we'll try to get you an answer back. And if you're looking for a proposal to undertake the professional services to assist your company, business or organisation to obtain a grant under this program, we are very interested in making a submission to you. Thank you for being with us. Stay safe. Have a great day. Goodbye. And I hope that you've got a better understanding of now what these new Northern Australia grants are all about. Thank you. Bye.